You guys are super excited. We have Michael Glassford here with us from Legal Inc. Estate Planning. And I've actually used Michael for my own stuff to help me set up some businesses. So he was nice enough to come in here and tell us the things that we need to know that we don't, is pretty much how it goes. So I want you first to kind of do just an introduction, where you grew up, how you got into law, and this specific field would kind of be a good start.
That's a long story.
I know. So we'll just, Trevor, can I nap?
Take a nap. Just close your eyes. I'll talk in slow, pear-shaped tones.
That would make for a really good podcast.
Yeah.
Slow,
very relaxing.
Get my NPR voice on. So I haven't grown up yet, but I was young in Southern California, and I always wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
And I knew that doesn't pay the bills.
You have to have the backup plan.
I continued in this silly writing vein into school, into college, and I was an English major, and I knew that this was a dead end, education for me. Oh, I loved it, right?
Yeah.
And so I went to law school to feed the addiction.
Yeah.
And became a lawyer, and I came out and was a general practice.
Where did you go to school for law?
So I went to a little tiny school in Topeka, Kansas called Washburn University. I'd never heard of it, but I wanted to go to a Midwest school because I was going to practice in Missouri when I started. Okay. So that school and a couple other schools had accepted me, and Mizzou is like kind of the big school in that area. But their price tag was twice as much, and so I'm like, I kind of like this Washburn.
I can learn to love that. Yeah, exactly.
And you learn really quick that all your teachers
so
are from Duke and from Yale and from Harvard. Like, it's the same education wherever you go. It's the networking that you're paying for.
It's true.
And so I didn't need the networking because I had a job lined up, and so I just learned as fast as I could, and I actually did it in 2 years, and they made me come back for another semester. They just wanted more money. Right. And then I was off to the races. So I worked in Missouri for 10 years as a general practitioner. I did all the things that came in the door because it was a town of like 7,000 people. Yeah. And then over the years, with as I got braver, I let things go. So I let criminal law go first, and then I let family and divorce law go, and finally, I just specialized in estate planning and trusts with an emphasis in business because that's who my clients are. Mm-hmm. So I still do a lot of business law, formation, contract, things like that.
Yeah, because you've been helping me with that, and I need to get I have a trust, but I need to have it looked at. No, I do, because I know it's not set up, and I just found out from one of our other clients that like my 401k and stuff is not set up properly and I shouldn't be putting in my trust, but I was instructed to do so. And
we'll look at that. Everyone has an opinion on that.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff where, we'll look at that and see, because I was like, oh, crap, I thought I was being good.
Yes, I need to get one.
We all need you that. Do. And it sometimes gets confusing for folks because all I do is marketing-wise is trust, estate planning. But because I market to business owners, I still get, a lot of my work is business law focused.
Well, and I think a lot of people people who own their own businesses are often like, how do I protect what I've built?
It kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
If your business isn't set up right, your trust isn't set up right.
Right. And that's kind of what I was thinking, is like those two things oftentimes go together.
Yeah.
That you'd at least have to know enough to help people in that, even if that wasn't where you were going to do stuff. Anyway. Yeah.
So it's a passion of mine. I'm a business serial, entrepreneur. I think I have 11 active businesses right now. One of these days I should count.
How many do I have that I've had him set up? It's like 4 or 5 at this point.
It was 4.
It's 4. Yeah. It's 4.
You brought it up so I can say that.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Otherwise, it's a
hey, that was private. No, but it's one of those things that I keep having these different business ideas.
It's 4 as of now.
Yeah, 4 as of now.
4 and counting.
Yeah.
There we go.
Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were joking because we just started one for like the Maine Coon cats that we had, and we were going to name it with like 50 different words. Like what was it? Like catnip and cauldrons, cattery, consortium of concoction. I don't know.
List.
Anyway,
It's a fun
this is how lawyers have fun and things like that. We
not all lawyers have that kind of fun. They're mainly less fun.
I know. I swear, because we come up with the craziest crap over here. So one of the things I liked is that I could actually come to you and go, hey, I have this idea. How do I do it? How do I do it right? Type of thing. Okay, so what made you come to Utah?
So I have family here, and we would come every summer and just visit. And then one summer, it just felt like it was the place to be. Time to come I never thought I'd say that when I left Utah as a student. I graduated from BYU, and I was done with the place.
Yeah.
Done with Utah.
I was done. I figuratively wiped my feet of Utah.
And then you're like, but then
I came back.
Yeah.
And so I've been here since 2013.
Okay.
So did your whole family move from Southern California to Utah?
So it was kind of in a progression. Like I left after high school and I never really lived there again. And in 2004, my parents retired and they moved up to Utah and bought this, really big house for not a whole lot of money. And because they sold their really small house in California for a lot of money, they did well in real estate. And then all of a sudden, Utah just became what it is now. And again, they did really well in real estate.
Absolutely. Okay. So if people need to get a will and a trust, like kind of take them through what things you'll go over with them or things that they need to tell you about or know. Yeah, get your pen out. You can just replay it later.
Yeah,
kind of go through that process, I guess.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Score.
That just summarize like what you talk about, what they need to tell you.
So a lot of the beginning process of the conversation is just that. It's a conversation because there's a lot of false narrative out there. There's a lot of misinformation, thanks to social medias. I won't name them, but people go on and say, what about this? And you get like 27 wrong answers, but which is okay. The worst though is 27 half right answers. And that's what they're mostly getting. And so they get this, this mixed bag of information. And so really the first three things that I need to nail down is what a will is, what it does.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that with the client. And the biggest misnomer in that is that they think that a will avoids probate. They've heard these words, probate, will, things like that. And they think that if only I have a will, then I'll have everything set up. And you kind of have to backtrack from that and say, well, how do we know about wills? Like, what is the source? Where are we learning these things from? And why do we think that that's the thing that we need? And it really comes from movies, TV
I was going to
show.
say, because as a little kid, I remember thinking, you just got to have a will.
Grandpa's will.
Yeah, exactly right.
We got Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. There's a will in that. He's going to give it to Charlie. We've got Brewster's Millions. Recent movies, Knives Out. I'm just screaming
I
in
love
that
Knives
movie.
Out. Sorry.
Yeah, by the way, they weren't fighting over $90 million. They were fighting over $45 million because the government took half because he left it in a will. But you don't know that.
But see, this is why this is important.
But I nerd out about that stuff. Even in Harry Potter, when Dumbledore leaves the fate of the world in the hands of teenagers, but he leaves the fate of the world in the hands of teenagers through a will. Mm-hmm. He gives them 4 items that are critical in saving the world. One of them doesn't make it through the government process, the sword. True. And the other 3, they have to cryptically figure out what. See,
I can totally
Yeah, so Dumbledore, of all of his greatness,
He wasn't prepared.
He should have
it should have been done in a trust.
But then there wouldn't have been a story because I can solve most stories with a trust.
It just eliminates the need for
anything Jane Austen is done with a trust. Like the Bennetts aren't going to be evicted. Like we're okay. So
it's amazing.
But that's the thing. I mean, it's like that we grew up thinking that the will was this magical document that as long as you had that and you put it in your nightstand and then people found it, you're good.
As long as you're not crossed off of it.
But then you back up from that and you say, well, why are these wills showing up in stories? Well, what makes a good story? Drama. What makes drama? Wills. And so this is why they're there.
You still have to go to court to figure out. Now, I have heard, so correct me if I'm wrong, if they have a will, you're still going to have to go to court, and the court decides if the items in the will get distributed the way the will says. Is that correct?
So it's a process, yeah. So a will doesn't avoid probate. Probate is the name for that specific kind of court, but it directs probate. It tells the judge what to do with the things once all of the other processes have taken place. Okay. So if you think of probate as like a giant filter, like we're going to drop in everything that we own, and it's going to come out on the other side diminished, or some of it's going to be gone because we had to sell it along the way. Mm-hmm. And we're inviting the government into our lives purposefully.
Not gonna do it.
We don't like that so much. Yeah. But we're asking them not only to officiate our final party, but that we are beholden to their rules. Mm-hmm. And so nothing wrong with that if that's all we've got. But the answer to that is trust,
Yep.
because we go through this will process, and there's an expense in writing the will, there's an expense in filing the will to be probated, there's an expense hiring the attorney, there's an expense in publishing. You're literally like making an announcement to the world saying, hey,
If anybody has a claim on this.
yeah,
Oh
but
my
then
gosh.
the claims that come in, we have to go through each one and make sure that they're legitimate,
Right.
and then figure out a way to settle those claims. And so
See, we've run into probate on our end of things in mortgages just because somebody didn't have their house in a trust or they died during the process. And we had to wait for the probate part to do its thing. And that's not a short process.
And most of the time, the house is the biggest asset in the estate. Estate just means the things that were in your name when you passed away.
Yep.
So it's not a big house with white pillars in the South.
It can be.
It's just, it can be, but it's more than that. It's just anything that's in your name.
That you
that's
own,
your
yeah.
estate.
Yep.
And so the house is the biggest asset. And if it sits empty for any amount of time, a smart realtor is going to come in and say, well, we're not going to pay full value for that. It was
Yep.
empty.
Yep.
And so now we've lost a percentage of the biggest asset of the estate, and that's a big hit right there.
Yep.
So there's a lot of time, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of emotion that goes into this thing called
Absolutely.
probate, which is completely avoidable
I was going to say, yeah, you could avoid that by having a trust.
with trust and proper planning and strategic planning. And so we hit trust, and then we had another set of narratives that people have in their mind, and there's a bunch, but I narrow it down to 3. One is that trust is for rich people, and I'm not rich.
Yeah. Well,
Trust
because you
are-
hear trust fund baby.
Yeah,
all that
you hear
stuff.
all that language, and
I'd like to
legally
be one.
blonde, and all that stuff. Then you think, well, trust are for people with a bunch of stuff, and I just have a house, a car, and a bank account, and a couple investments. So I don't have a whole lot.
Yeah.
And then the final one is that the trusts are super expensive, and those darn attorneys. Well, I can't speak for that because we're the worst. But those are kind of the 3 things, right? And
Yeah.
so I have to walk through each one of those. And for the first one, I tell a really stupid story. And I'm like, well, you were listening to the radio station, you were calling number 9, and you won an all-inclusive trip to Vegas, including the car. And you're so excited that you run to Las Vegas and buy the car on the strip. And people are looking at me like that line from Happy Gilmore, like, we are all dumber for listening to that.
Or having
Like,
listened to you. Yeah.
may God have mercy on your soul. Right? It's a stupid story.
Right.
The only person that might do it is Mr. Bean, if you know who he is.
Yeah, I
I
do.
love Mr. Bean.
You could see him doing
I'm
that,
older.
right?
I'm older than I look.
But the rest of us, not so much. But that's how we approach
Older
estate
than I
planning.
act. Is that more appropriate?
We think that we need to arrive in Richtown before we buy the vehicle that was designed to help us get there. And so it's a mindset shift. We say, I don't get to trust when I become whatever rich means to you,
Yeah.
and that's subjective. But I get the vehicle now, and I start using it towards. And there's just so many benefits to having it in place. Organization, focus. Where your mind is, then there's your action, and so you start manifesting
Yep.
wealth when you've already created the vessel to hold it.
In which way to do it.
So that's
'Cause
like step 1.
I was telling you the other day, like with these companies that we're setting up and different things we have going, like I want to create generational wealth, put it in a trust and let it continue to grow and that sort of thing. And so it does change your mindset. My husband and I did ours early on, and I was sitting here thinking, like, why did I do it? Because I think maybe we did it when we had our first kid, because we were like, okay, we probably should do that because what if something happens to us? We don't just want certain people getting our child and raising them however the heck they want, right? And things of that nature. I think that's kind of where ours started. That was the motivating factor for us. But then in the trust, you're talking about any assets that I have. When does he get this money? And who controls it? So that's kind of an interesting about the trust. You can decide who does what, when, how.
And the trust is going to evolve. It's going to evolve with your family and your financial situation.
Yep.
And so you did right by having that trust, several years ago. And,
Yep.
and your situation is different now.
Yep.
So it's time to review and update.
Absolutely.
And that date matters because trust mature, and there's some laws in place that your trust needs to be at least 5 years older to survive some things that are out there. So that's good.
Yeah.
I suggest every 18-year-old should just download a trust off the internet. I'm not suggesting this, but if they had that in place and no problems ensued because of that, we could come and restate that trust and put some good legs underneath it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to just start somewhere.
Right. Well, why would you want, like, why would an 18-year-old or somebody early on want to do it? You were talking about, I guess kind of if it's older, then you have more teeth into something or what?
There's that. It's just, again, it's a focus. You know, what 18-year-old besides, I don't know, like
Well, it's kind of like
the
starting
kid
a
from-
401k the minute you can. Or
what's the kid on Family Ties? The Michael Fox.
Jay Fox? I
But
don't
what's his
remember.
name? Is it Michael Keaton? Is that the name?
No, I think it's the Keaton family.
Alex Keaton.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're him, you're focused on building wealth. But the rest of us at 18, we're like
Yeah.
cars, and,
Chicks.
stuff. But it'll definitely focus, give you a focus or give you a landing place to start building.
It's like
that
your
kind of
vision
stuff.
board in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
It's your financial
It's your
vision
plan.
board.
Yeah.
And so I
like that. I like that analysis or the metaphor. I don't know what's the word. I'm like analogy. Now we're gonna have to go into an English thing because now I can't remember.
There you go.
Anyway,
But
yeah,
it's
I
like
like
a spare
that.
room. Like have you ever had a spare room?
I know we do have. Yeah. Was
That-
it analogy?
Yeah. uh-huh.
Yeah. Thanks.
Have you ever had a spare room that stayed empty? Mm-hmm. No, you fill it up with stuff,
Fill it up with-
or you fill it up with guests.
Right.
So your trust, again, with the different analogies, is like a spare room financially, and you start doing things to fill it up and to
Yep.
keep things safe, preserved, protected,
I like
and
it.
you grow with it. But when your kid's 2, you don't know if he's going to be fiscally responsible
Right.
when he's 18. So that's going to change a little bit.
That's an interesting thing you bring that up because my parents just told me that they were taking some of theirs and they changed their trust to skip some money for us, which is fine, and giving it to the grandkids. And I told my parents, I'm like, I'm not actually comfortable with you giving my kids X amount right now in their lives. Like, I don't like that because they're not old enough to know where they should be putting that and not go,
Exactly. And
blow it.
That brings us into that second phase, trust is for people with a bunch of stuff. It's actually, yes, but more so than that, trusts are about creating systems and control
Yep.
and maintaining control. Because with that control, instead of, your parents giving money to your kids at a young age, that trust can say, this is set aside for the child.
Yeah.
At
And they
18,
can get it
we'll
at this
give,
age
we'll
or
give
for
a
school.
percentage for school. At 20, we'll give a percentage for, if you're doing some kind of mission or something like that. At 25, if you get married, we'll give some money for that. Like you can structure
You can
that.
specify it. When they first talked to it, I think they thought I was going to be super excited. And I was like, there needs to be some stipulations that, like, what if my drug addict, if I end up with a drug addict kid, I'm not giving him $50,000.
No, that could destroy him.
Yeah. And so I was like, it needs to come to us. I don't care if it's earmarked. I don't care if it's like secure somewhere. But no kid under 18 needs $50,000 that doesn't have some oversight.
And no kid under 18 can have $50,000 because if you give money to a minor, then the government comes in with a conservatorship, and now the government has oversight until the child turns 18, and there's an accounting, and there's court, and there's all. We're back. We're right back in.
Because I told my parents, I said, I
want.
want you to go back to whoever your person is, and you need to put something in there that we get to help them. Like it comes to us to help them or something. That it can't just skip us.
So that's the main value for besides the probate avoidance. We can control some of this stuff. And I just at lunch I just talked to someone about I have everything's in a beneficiary deed and my child's on the house, and so everything's like good, better, best.
Yeah.
Like that's good, okay. But there's a better and best.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say that's
there's
not
some
how-
issues with those things. Like if you put your child on
Step
the
up
house.
basis.
Now you've crossed streams, Ghostbusters talk, and there's liability. Like any liability that your child creates, that house is an asset on their balance sheet too.
Well, yeah, because if the parent bought the house for $200,000 and you give the kid a house that's worth $1 million, the kid now owes taxes because it's a step up in basis.
Well, there's all of that,
Yeah.
but like if they're out, and about,
put 'em on title,
and
put
then
it
they
in the
get
trust.
sued and they owe money, that asset could be ordered to be paid.
But if
for
it's in
that
the
debt.
trust, then they can't get to it.
Well, it depends on how it's in the trust.
Sure.
It's not all black.
If you have
and
a good
white.
attorney.
Yeah. So there's that. There's asset protection and there's probate avoidance and kind of different things. But for the first part of it, we want to make sure that we're not crossing liability. So that's
Yep.
not good. And then second, the beneficiary, act, naming someone as a beneficiary we can do that with title on death with cars and pay on death with bank accounts and with 401ks and all that stuff. We can do that. But 9 times out of 10, it's great. But what if the beneficiary that you named died in the same accident as you did? So now there's a bunch of money to a dead person,
Yep.
we have to probate it. So
Yeah.
it's not
You need a
foolproof.
contingent, yeah.
Or even worse, if that person is, in that accident and you don't update things, and sending that money to them would ruin their Social Security disability income, because now they have a bunch of money and they
Well,
can't
and
have
that could also impact somebody with Medicaid.
all of those things. And so the trust just is a vehicle that gives you a moment to take a beat before you send anything out, before you ruin anyone's lives, and say, okay, we've got this money. This is what it's designated for.
Yeah,
this
go
is who
talk
it's
to your
designated
planners and make
for.
sure you're not going to get,
And what does the trust give us? What does it give us authority to do? Hopefully it's giving us authority to take that second, in that moment, and say, okay, what's best for this beneficiary?
Yep.
And we could do that with trust. We can't do
Yep.
that with the single shot beneficiary kind of
See,
stuff.
that's what I liked with in my parents' situation. They were trying to be really nice to the grandkids, but I was like, as a parent, I don't want my kid getting their hands on $50,000 when he's 14 or whatever. Because my parents are 83. My youngest is 8. There's a decent chance he would have $50,000 or whatever that number is prior to the, being 18.
And our priorities are different. I got hit by a car when I was in junior high, and there was a money settlement, and I got a little bit of money when I turned 18, 19, and it paid for my mission. And then I had a lump sum that came when I got home. And the most important thing to me at that time, not because it was fun, but because I was in law school and I needed to do things, was a vehicle.
Right.
So I put that money into a vehicle rather than investing it and making it grow, several vehicles. Because my perspective wasn't there at that time. So it's not necessarily I'm going to go buy bad things. It's just I don't have the worldview yet.
Yeah, and you don't know what it's like. Well, I mean, we've talked about that where it's like you don't know what you don't know so many times with financial decisions, and they don't take us through those things in school to tell you, hey, guess what? Like, this would be a better place for your money. And there's, for a lot of kids, they don't have an adult that actually knows those things.
Yeah.
So I went through a very good high school education in Southern California. I went to BYU and did that education. I went through, the law school education. So I have a Juris Doctorate. I'm a doctor.
He's a freaking rock star.
And I never had a financial class.
Yep.
Right?
It's interesting. So my dad's a retired physician, and they actually made the doctors go through a business class. So at his school. So because what they were finding is a lot of doctors didn't know how to run a business, and the financial part.
They had a class like that at law school, how to run a law office, but it's 25 years later, that was woefully still inadequate to prepare someone to run a business.
Yep. Yeah, we all know that running businesses, it's not anywhere near as easy as people think it is.
So for those listening that are in my boat, just talk to him, because this is all like, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so underprepared.
So
but I'll present it with all analogies that you understand, and we'll talk Harry Potter all day long. Ghostbusters, yeah.
He's more
Lord
of the Star
Rings.
Wars guy.
We'll do Star Wars. Star Wars is a great analogy,
It's a lot like Harry Potter.
I teach trust according to Princess Bride, according to Seinfeld, according to I did it once with Ron Swanson, but it was a little edgy, little pejorative, but I
like it.
I took on the character of Ron Swanson.
Yeah, you just
and taught trust law according to that. Like, he even says in the show, like, to the person that finds my gold.
Dude, I love that where he's at. I don't know what he was.
Parks and Rec,
but like he's at somewhere and he's like, "Do you have a permit for that?" And he's like, "Yep." And it says, "I do what I want." On the
Yep.
Anyway, that's like my favorite thing.
I try to meet my people where they're
when
at.
you said things in ways that I was like, nobody's ever said it that way, and it does make you kind of
go get a trust.
Okay, so people like Trevor who need a trust, and me who needs to redo a trust. Let's start with the needs to do one. Generally, if it's, I guess, give us a range of what somebody might expect to pay for a solid trust.
So that's all over the place. So again, the first conversation is what we've been talking about. I've created what's called my estate plan guide. I send that out to my clients. They fill it out. It's relatively easy. It can be a little daunting to some because it has the feel of a financial statement. Yeah. But I don't need everything as detailed as what a bank would want for a loan. Mm-hmm. But we need an inventory. We need to know what we're talking about, what we're dealing with, and information on the family and you and who your people are, because who's going to be on the team, who's going to serve in these capacities when you can't, and that kind of starts the conversation for them. They get introduced to the terms and the things that we're going to talk about. Yeah. Then we get together and we have a conversation, because if you walk into a car dealership and say, I want car, and the dealer's like, you want car? Like, what do you want to use it? Right? What do you want to use it for? Like, well, I want to drive. Okay, where? Like, how many people are you driving? Are you off-roading?
You have to know. You have to know more details.
Like, so, like, to say I want trust, like, oh,
yeah, because I know you can get a fairly cheap trust all the way up to thousands and thousands.
You can go online and download. You can talk to an attorney. I'm kind of a hybrid. In my situation, in the system that I've created, I can provide the more expensive trust for a whole lot less, because I've created systems and processes that take time out of it for me, which gives a savings to the client. So I've created this kind of hybrid system.
Yeah, because you have like an intake form, like even for just my LLCs, that you have me fill out whenever I want to do something, and I don't always fill them out.
Which keeps it, less expensive.
Yeah,
because it's not a lesser trust or LLC, but you don't have to pay as much because it's not taking as much time from the attorney.
You can look at what it needs to be, and when I spell my own LLC wrong, you can say, "Did you mean to do that?"
And we check, because we're in Utah, and creative spelling is a thing.
Yeah, he was like, "Did you mean to spell it this way?" I was like, "No, but it was 3 in the morning."
The Q is silent.
Lots of extra Y's and Q's and things. It's okay.
But I was laughing. I was like, "I'm glad you asked me. You haven't like submitted that, right?" But it was like 3. I was literally at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning when I was like filling out this form because my printer hadn't been hooked up for days.
Yep.
Oh, I found the other printer.
There you go.
Sweet.
So, that's where we start. And then we have that conversation, and we start figuring out, oh, you want to drive a family. Oh, you want to do this. You have this many people. And then we start narrowing it down to what you need, because I provide this in more of an a la carte kind of thing, because some people don't need this service or that service. I provide it, but if you don't need me to create the deed to transfer your house into the trust because you have a hookup with the title company, use them. I have this horrible business model that says if you don't have to pay me, don't.
It's appreciated.
It is appreciated.
But for what you do need, pay me, because there's this whole deal about downloaded documents. Like, we live in the information age, and there's just so much information. And the danger isn't that you're downloading a bad document. The danger is you don't understand what the document you downloaded does.
Yep.
That's the issue.
I feel like I'm more scared to make decisions now with how much information and, incorrect information is out there, because I don't know. Yeah, just kind of like what you're saying. I don't know if this is an accurate document that covers all the things that I would need.
So one of the things that people come at me first is like, well, you just use boilerplate documents, right? And I'm like,
what does that even mean?
I use templates that I've curated and made specifically to your situation.
Right.
And I understand what they do. You're not buying a document from me. You're buying my expertise and understanding the document that I just wrote for you.
Right.
That's the law service.
Right.
If you want a document, you can go online and download it.
Well, that's the thing. When you're talking trust and where you want money to end up and where you want your kids to end up if you die, it's pretty important that that's done correctly.
Yeah. See, then that's a whole other subject, because the trust is the purse. It's the financial side of things. It speaks nothing to what happens to the kids. We throw that guardianship, language around, and we throw that in the trust, or we throw that in the will, but that's only scratching the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure, when it comes to children, and it's something called child protection planning. It's a whole standalone plan from the trust, because some people don't have that in situations, some people do, but we want to make sure that the kids never fall into the wrong hands or into the hands of the state. So we close all time lapses, any opportunity for those kind of things to happen. And people are like, oh, it's not going to happen. They're going to end up with my mom. I'm like, well, let's run that through.
Yeah.
So in one scenario, in both scenarios, they'll probably end up with your mom. But in one scenario, you have the paperwork in place that makes it very clear that they're supposed to be with your mom.
Right.
And the government never gets involved but for the hearing to appoint her as the guardian. That's scenario A. You were ready for that. Scenario B is that the government does become involved. Say you're in the car accident, and the police come to the home to do a child check because they know that there's kids at home. The babysitter's like, well, call them. And they're like, well, they were in the accident. And so, we'll call grandma. So grandma comes over, and Children's Services is there, and they send the kids home with grandma, but they open a case. So now the government's involved. There's a case opened. We do family support team meetings. We do monthly court meetings. We have yearly accountings. Until the children turn 18, it's a whole different...
It should never have been
They're still with grandma, but it's a whole different life now for grandma. We've saddled her with this continuing litigation, essentially.
Oh my gosh. And oversight that doesn't need to be there.
We didn't plan it. And then when we get to that court hearing, on paper, judges like to read paper dossiers, right? They like to know what's going on before they come into the court. So this is a Harry Potter analogy. The Dursleys on paper, they look great.
Right.
Married couple, home, car, job, security, kid. Judge is going to pick the Dursleys all day long, and we're screaming, from heaven saying, no, not the Dursleys.
Not the Dursleys.
And then the other choice, Sirius Black is a single. He's a scofflaw. He's got some trouble with the law. He's a motorcycle rider. He's got an earring, right? The judge is never going to pick that guy, but he's the right guy for Harry.
Right.
But unless we have prepared a system for the judge to know that,
pretty smart.
They're never going to pick him.
See, because he speaks my language.
I speak HP, right? So, awesome. I mean, there's, we can do it with any fantasy or sci-fi. It's great. Yeah. It's great. So, but the idea is if we don't have that kind of planning in place, we've failed the plan. And then the next plan is that the government has a plan for us. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Yeah. But if we can have our own plan in place, it's better.
Absolutely.
Good, better, best.
Yes, exactly. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I have a website, www.legallifeplan, legallifeplan.com.
Okay.
They can reach out to me there. info@legallifeplan.com is my email. I'm readily accessible on Facebook and all those socials.
That's where I think somebody referred me to you for all my stuff through Facebook.
Most of my new clients, the first communication is through Messenger.
I know.
I never saw that coming.
I know, isn't that weird?
But if you're old school, you can still use my phone number, but that's 801-610-6691. But, it's rare that I have a new client call come in. It's usually through one of those mediums. So
and Michael gets recommended all the time through Connect Utah and a bunch of other places too, where people just know and have used you, because I've used you 4 times now or whatever, helping us set up LLCs and need to come in for my trust, obviously, to have it relooked at, because it's been 13 years since I did anything with it, and now I have 2 more kids, and
it's a good time for that.
The review of it, yeah.
I used to put a family picture on the front of the trust, and I said, when you don't look like this anymore, it's time to come back.
It's time to come. That's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
But it was kind of like pulling teeth to get that picture, because a lot of people were like, "Oh, I got to take a family picture," and I'm like, "No, just snap a selfie."
Recent, yeah.
But no, it was more
it's
difficult.
Like the realtors that they give you the card, or you see their card and you see them in person. You're like, "That was from 20 years ago. Your hair is not brown anymore."
It was more difficult to get that picture, so I kind of let that go. But I love
the idea of it, though. So. Yeah. But I'm sure we just barely scratched the surface on any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But for those of you who are even wondering, just reach out to Michael. And the forms that I had to fill out were not that hard. And I'm sure those ones, most of them, people know how much is in their bank account and these kinds of things, or who they bank with. So reach out to him, see how much yours might cost. I really am going to come and have mine relooked at, because it definitely is time, and our situation has changed. And
some of this information is sensitive too. So number one, anything you send to me is privileged information. But 2, if you don't know me yet because we haven't spoke, it's okay to fill out what you're comfortable with.
Right.
And we'll fill in the gaps when you're comfortable going forward.
Right. That just gives you an idea. So reach out to him. I'm really we're going to set up an appointment, because if I don't do it, I just forget. And I think that's just kind of human nature until we have some reason to think about it. I thought about it because I had a kid all of a sudden. I was like, I want to protect him, right? And now I still need to protect him. And I know my trust isn't how it's supposed to be currently. At least it's probably not.
It's usually at those life events that we start thinking about that.
I know.
But, I was 2.5 years divorced before I realized that my ex was still getting everything. And I do this.
Yes, so you're like,
I share that not to shame myself, but to say we're all in the same boat.
No, honest to goodness, in loans, when I go to have my own loan done, I all of a sudden don't know how to do them anymore. And what do I need to give you? And you're like, you've done this for 20 years. You know what they need to give you, but
but for them, not for me.
Yeah, it's a different thing when all of a sudden it's you. But anyway.
So, but we're all in the same boat. And part of my job is to gently remind, hey, this is the next step. Hey, this is what we got to do.
Yeah, and you had to remind me, like, hey, have you filled that out yet? Oh, yeah, that. So and I appreciate that. But I've used them, so, I mean, I can't always say, like, you're going to have the best experience, but I've had an awesome experience. I'll use you on every one that I have. So anyway, give them a call. And we appreciate you coming in and teaching us. And we're going to learn a lot more when we come in for our individual stuff. But thanks for coming in.
We'll have a lot of fun. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about and relate it to trust.
You can talk about Lord of the Rings with my husband and Harry Potter with me, and we'll be good.
We'll get it done. Perfect. And if it's a fandom I don't know yet, give me like a heads up.
Give you a minute. Give you look it up.
I'll be teaching through songbirds and snakes soon. So.
Songbirds and snakes.
Yeah, that's the new.
That's the next LLC.
No, it's the new Hunger Games.
I was like, is that my next LLC?
There's so many lessons in that one. Like, Coriolanus isn't even poor.
Hold up, there's another Hunger Games coming out?
Just came out. It's already out.
A book or a movie?
Both. Book was out years ago. The movie just came out.
What?
And it's amazing.
Because I read 3.
You uncultured.
But there was 3, because there was 3 books before.
3 books. They made it into 4 movies.
They made a prequel.
No, they made a prequel.
Snow's story.
You were telling me about that, actually. Yeah. I just forgot the name.
This is when we liked President Snow. Ish,
apparently. I haven't seen it yet.
I don't like him at all. Anyway, we derailed, but thank you for coming in. Anyway, it was great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you too.